Ricardo for inviting us, and the conference within the frame of digital creation and post-conflict is called Hybrid Spaces of the Image, from Metaphor to Representation. If you want to have further information about my work at the end of the conference, there is still my website that you can search, or you can even Google me, but make no mistake, I'm not Eric Raymond Geek, I'm Eric Raymond Artist. So it's ericraymond.com, so I'm very easy to find on the web as soon as you put artist as a suffix. Maybe it's a matter of me feeling like I'm getting old, but I'm going to go through a lot of my work. Well, not much in terms of a number of work, but it'll span from '84 to today. So I will speak like freely, but sometimes I have 2 pages of text to read like this, and the other ones will be with images. So I'll try not to be too boring. So my previous and actual work is rather metaphorically situated here within the theme of digital creation and post-conflict. Well, since my work is not exactly about conflict, but the processes are involving some types of conflict. And this idea of conflict will be developed as the complex relation between consciousness, intentionality, and the emergence of an idea or visual image, a true form. This process usually takes place in a trial where representations of images and narrative progressively get disentangled through the emergence of metaphors and other surprisingly unexpected connections, which is, in a certain sense, a common way visual arts are working. I usually like to say that visual artists have more to show than they have to tell, which is already a kind of conflict in itself. Therefore, post-conflict could then be associated with the means found that we then take to shape and export this relation into reality as an artwork, since these images are, in a certain sense, in our mind, and they have to find their way through the reality. So, maybe even more specifically, when we start to talk publicly about this given work, and as you will see at the last part of the conference, the work I'll be showing has I've never been talking about, so it's a premiere. So there are a few blocks of works that make my production since 1984, and the first is the Bestia Figurée. So there are several works of each, but I only show 2 of them per blocks. So figures of speech may create images projecting work through witty puns and visual association reflecting the arbitrary nature of the image inception. Sometimes, but certainly not always, these images may jump spontaneously out of our mind as if they were ready-made. As, for an example, this old work from '84, which is called Still Life. My titles always enlighten some kind of reference on the work it depicts. This is a snowmobile by the famous Rembrandt Slaughtered Ox picture. Obviously, the picture is much bigger than the original Rembrandt, since the Rembrandt is maybe 30 centimeter high, and this one is 300 centimeter high. So it has to be big enough to accommodate a snowmobile. Fragility of both biologic and electronic image is related to their intrinsic dependency on hardware to become and keep being what we call reality. So in this specific type of work, I really like to relate to some kinds of ways to show video images, which are not only moving images, but they're dependent on a lot of hardware to exist. So I wanted to make them more precarious even by showing the content of the video by reflections on pools. So you see here you have an ink basin that reflects these images, and you have those miharis. So they are dromedarians with with saddles on their back, and they were all made of motorcycle parts, so this was a big part of my work for several years. And the work here is called Mirage, it dates from 1994. So the parts were not modified at all, or maybe sometimes just a little bit adapted. À la manière des romans, from 93 to 97, is plays with puns, and especially witty puns, playing of language. So it plays directly with the idea, I guess most people here knows Romanesque art, so which was inspired by the Roman, especially by the arch, these specific half-center arches that defined a new way of thinking about architecture. And so I started working these pieces at the same time than the animals, and I was planning to show them together and to mix them together. And then at a certain point, while having a beer in my studio, I was a little bit like, I wouldn't say drunken, but less than drunken. And I just looked at the work and said, well, I've always loved that Romanesque style of architecture, and well, it's something to do a bridge with a couple of thousands of books, and it weighs a couple of thousands of pounds. So, and I took myself, I should certainly call that pont roman, which means Roman bridge in French. And then it struck me like a baseball bat. It's just like, why don't I call it simply pont roman? And from there, I told myself that literal metaphors can sometimes be read as bold statements. And they don't necessarily lack effective power, as they can become blatantly meaningful, no matter the fight engaged for having them to spring to mind, because I was having a huge fight to find a way to incorporate this in my new work at the time. So finally the solution came by itself in a kind of flash. And I continued this work with some other works of the series À la manière des romans, which means, by the way, well, À la manière des romans is the translation of more romano, which was the expression that the Italians and the Frenchmen were utilizing to talk about this architectural style in the Middle Ages, because it was made in the way the Romans were doing it. So they're all made of novel book, obviously. I guess it's possible to see it, and it's written. So this pun with the novel book and the roman was at the center part of the work, especially because at that time internet was growing bigger and bigger, and this idea of writing was told by a lot of people like becoming obsolete. And so I made this lantern project, which includes two lanterns that are facing each other. And in one of them, you'll find a video projection, and in the other one, a light box of the same image. The right side is a simple, it's like a satellite view, but it's been taken in Time Life magazine or book. So it's a printed matter, it's a printed media. And so you can see the dots of the printed paper as you rove on the path. And the path is exactly the same that you'll find on this side with the light box. So you have on one side a very electronic image of something which is in fact the Roman Forum, because this image here is the Forum in Rome. And on the other side you have the full picture of the place. And it looks like a satellite image, but it's not at all. And at that time it was very difficult to find satellite images. It was something that most people of NASA were using, and it was possible to find some on the internet, but it was nothing like Google Street View or Google Maps. So fragility was still at stake with the growing tension between image and language in a society where digital information traceable through network get an added value of existence. For For instance, if you try to find something and you cannot name it, it'll be very difficult to Google it and to give it its plus of reality. Lanterne Lighthouse, which is my most recent work. In fact, this encompasses most of the work I've been doing lately. There are new works, so I don't necessarily know exactly in which blocks I should fit them now, but I usually say that Lanterne Lighthouse includes most of my robotic work. So it spans from 1997 to 2012, and what you'll see here mostly date of the 2000s. Well, all date of the 2000s. So, architecture provides a significant way to interpret how we project and situate ourselves and dwell our world, no matter how conflictual our relation is to both nature and our surrounding environment. We affectionate to represent ourselves as separate from nature. It's a convenient way of digging into the illusion of resolving the difficult and intricate relation that puts us as much inside as we think we're outside this world we are dealing with. Conservationist movement, namely Frederick Law Olmsted with the Mariposa Grove in Yosemite Park, and photographic missions were amongst the first attempt to freeze landscape in order to generate memories of what could eventually become a spoiled natural heritage. I here speak of Frederick Law Olmsted. You probably have heard about him. He's one of the most famous end of the, second half of the 19th century architect, landscape architect that the United States have produced. And he did Central Park, in fact, and he also did the Parc du Mont-Royal in Montreal. And he did also the Emerald Necklace in Boston, and many of the most famous parks in North America. And he also played a major key role in preserving the Mariposa Grove in Yosemite, which is in the bottom of the valley. And by the way, one must note that Yosemite, people who have gone there might know that it looks like a postal card from about any angle you look at it. So it's like so picture perfect that it doesn't even look natural. And Frederick Law Olmsted built some paths to permit people to access the place, which in fact is less and less natural because you can go there with your SUV and your big bus equipped for the whole family and your TV. So there is something very strange occurring in the Mariposa Grove. So this is why it connects this nature culture I'm trying to talk about. Landscape and perspective plays a key role in our systems of representation. We usually prefer to ignore what natural landscape would have become without human protective and extremely cultural intervention, since this untouched idea makes them feel more natural. Here you have a series which is called Territoire Borderline from the 2000s, the first 10 years of the 2000s, and these are light boxes that are in fact 2 meters long by maybe 10 centimeters high. And I introduced them because last work is also light boxes, which come back frequently in my work. There are strong metaphoric links between the emergence of the image in the mind and the analogical process of darkroom photography, which came to be extended to the realm of digital images. So here is Landscape. This is an installation from 2002-2003, and it consists of a long panoramic image, but it's still a virtual image, so the monitors are moving inside the image, and they display it just the way, metaphorically, like the way paper goes into the acid when you're doing analogic photography. So analog photography. So I'll have a short video here. So as you see, the monitors are revealing the image. So landscape to amplify the realm of vision into a broader perspective on how we look at the world surrounding us. Perspective and landscape have always been sensitive to this question of the point of view. Here, computers, monitors, as you've been seeing, are moving in sync on one axis within a 4-meter still virtual image. This is the core of my robotic work that's been spanning until 2008, I would say. Since reality is dependent on the way our mind enlightens the world, hence the name Montreal Lighthouse, the world, especially when one defines it through science and technology, even so-called natural landscape, especially national parks, should be interpreted as cultural products. So here you see the trolleys. These are robots that are roughly 30 centimeter by 30 centimeter by, let's say, 150 millimeters. So they're pretty small, and they move in sync. There are 8 of them, so the installation may include 4 to 8 of them. It's been showed notably at the TPW Gallery in Toronto, and so we're going to have a look at a video that shows how they work, and you'll see that they move on 2 axes, so they can move on the x-axis, stop, and start moving on the y-axis without turning the monitor on top of them. So this was a pretty tricky thing to achieve, and this permits them to navigate through a virtual image in 2 dimensions. So here, a usual point of view, which is a satellite point of view that was not frequent at that time in 2002-2005, this was before Google Satellite View, that shows how we see nature through cultural lenses and have an incredible ease to forget it, since usually we take for granted today that satellite imaging is just out there, accessible to anyone. In fact, I've been visiting Manizales from Google before attending the place here. So the virtual image makes 2 by 3 meter roughly, so let's see how it works. So here you see the monitor evolving slowly in the picture. So this has been accelerated because it's much slower than this, but still I don't want to kill the people who look at the video, so I had to accelerate it. So you will understand that when the monitors are placed correctly in the choreography, like here, the Colorado River just flows from one computer monitor to the other. So they're controlled by AI and artificial vision. And they do this ballet on their own. I don't have any means to tell them how to go, when, and where. So they basically slide and reveal the image just like it was showed at TPW. It's the Toronto Photographers Workshop. It's a gallery that's quite well known over there, and they choose the project because it was a metaphor of photography in some ways. Thus, our way to appreciate landscape usually takes place within the frame of nature, though technology extends our point of view on natural phenomena. Here you have another installation I've been showing in many places. It's called The Scribes, and it's from 2005 to 2008. So these installations took roughly 3 years to achieve each one. And here, these small robots draw pictures on their own, based on many kinds of wave emission, notably the ones that you'll find in sunstorms. So we're on the Earth, we're exactly bombarded by these waves. They sometimes forces computers to reboot, and I designed a system that would just poke in that database and create drawing on its own and send them to the small robot with the lead pencil here that allows them to be drawn on the mylar surface. So here's a short video. This was funny because everywhere I showed this work, be it in London, England, or in Toronto, Ontario, everybody was taking care of the robot because you have to reboot the installation frequently, was telling me, oh, these two robots have really two different personalities. One of them is more lazy than the other. And there is that one that is always working very hard to draw his pictures. So people were really projecting, literally, personalities on the robots. Therefore, in the hands of an artist, artificial intelligence may become a peculiar way to explore the complex relations of the mind representational processes. Interior is a series of photographs that I've been doing since 2004. And the one that you're going to see is called, actually it's not the definitive title, but it should be called something like Larger Than Life. And it all dates from 2013, so last year. So back to this idea of ready-made, there's definitely a characteristic of photography that sets it apart of other medias, and it is the ability to project a content and narrative to a quite spontaneously selected, acquired, or built image. This is especially true with digital photography, where the result can have the same immediacy than that of a former Polaroid picture, which prevent the artist from working in a black box. Even further, since information is the very nature of these images, it allows the author to take an almost infinite number of pictures, putting selection at the very heart of the creative process. So this state of fact may also give us a clue to a new way of interpreting the ontology of the digital photographic image, as somewhat aside from the traditional imprint index categories. This also opens interesting perspective on narrative and how we freeze or give meaning to the picture, which is, in fact, I gave weird titles to these pictures, and this is a key point to the interpretation of that work, since I didn't decide what the work would be before taking the picture. So hey, we could have a certain type of conflict resolved here. I mean here, the conflict between what you have in the mind and what you output in the world. So we can also complicate it a little further by using complicated titles. Like here, the picture you see is called Babel Tower and City Fortification, with that inhabitant lying in between. And it is an excerpt from the series Innocent Victim of the Two Cities Riot. So narrative is absolutely key to the interpretation of this actual work, since it all relies on the title that I choose afterward to freeze the signification in the picture. So this seemingly surrealistic and candid attitude gives way to an heroism of the banal, which gets transfigured to gigantic proportion. In fact, all the pictures that you see now are taken in macro photographic shot on the edge of my window in my studio. So what you see here is called product of cutting-edge postmodernist activity, and it's in fact a chip. It's an aluminum chip that I brought from my metal lathe, since when I do these robots it does a lot of junk, and this chip is one of the junk, and I was struck by the way it looked like a Frank Stella. So I decided to choose the title that simply reflects this situation. And finally, doing so reverses the process of representation by allowing the image to emerge after the picture has been taken, since the title determinant does fix the content. So this one is called Colosseum in the Midday Dust Storm, as shot from my personal MH-66 Super Comanche combat helicopter. Like, everybody should have one. And this one is called Three-Story Cigarette surrounded by expandable fortresses. So I'll scan rapidly in the other pictures just to give you a taste of what the work is becoming. Tokyo, Kyoto, one-day round trip. This is basically chopstick with some Photoshop on it. Mount Fuji in the dusk following freezing rain as seen from Shinkansen heading to Tokyo. It's after Okusa. And finally, Lokama. And by the way, in the first picture, the fly was not there. It just died there the day after I took the picture, so I redid it because it was too fun. Thank you.